Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. Let's get this out of the way. The line is, she's got electric boots. Boots, like the footwear. Cool? Great. That's one of the most commonly misheard lyrics in the history of rock, so I figured I'd clear it up. But yeah, in case you haven't guessed, we're talking about one of my mom's favorite songs, Elton John's Bennie and the Jets. Happy birthday, Mom. It's not her birthday. But still, the original recording of the song starts with some crowd sounds apparently recorded from previous Elton John concerts, which is a pretty cool touch. It makes the studio version feel like a live performance, which is fitting since the song is about going to see a show. Of course, eventually they do start playing actual music. After about 8 seconds of crowd noise, Elton's piano comes in with this. Yeah, that's it. One chord played once. It's in F major 7, but that doesn't matter much. It's not really the start of the song. It's more like a sound check, like he's sitting down at his piano and playing something random to make sure it's properly mic'd, which again feeds into the live performance feel. After a couple more seconds though, the song starts for real with this iconic intro. Here we have a really strong quarter note pulse, which sounds a lot like a march. Normally when I hear marching rhythms I think military themes, but here, not so much. If you take this rhythm in context, combined with the crowd noises, the instrumentation, the bright major 7th chords, and this little syncopated figure in the middle that breaks up the pulse, the whole thing feels a lot more like a circus, which again is very on theme. As for the chords, we start on G major 7, the 1 chord, which helps establish the key. The inclusion of the major 7th is interesting to me. It makes the chord feel richer and more complex than a simple major triad. It feels luxurious, which sets the scene for the decadent stage show described in the lyrics. After that we move to F major 7, which is a bit strange in the key of G. This is the flat 7 chord, which doesn't exist in major, but going from 1 to flat 7 isn't by itself all that unusual. It's a technique called modal interchange where you borrow a chord from a different scale. There's no flat 7 in major, but there is one in minor, so it doesn't feel too unusual. The thing is though, while minor has a flat 7 major triad, it doesn't have a flat 7 major 7. If we extend the chord, we'd expect to get a dominant 7th, which is much more dissonant. That means we're not actually borrowing from minor at all. This chord comes from a less common scale called mixolydian, which is exactly like the major scale, but with the 7th note lowered. Normally, when we borrow from minor, it makes the music sound dark, so using a major 7 chord here to clarify that we're stealing from mixolydian instead helps keep things feeling nice and light. Next, we get to the verse, which is broken up into a series of 2-bar phrases. The first one sounds like this, where we start on 2 minor, then go to 5, then back to 1. These 3 chords combine to form an incredibly common harmonic device called a 2-5-1. Look, names are hard sometimes. Anyway, the point is, it's a really sturdy resolution that lands hard on the 1 chord and strongly establishes the key. Combined with the intro, there's no doubt that we're in G major, which is good because we never see that chord again for the rest of the verse. Anyway, that 2-5-1 is followed by this G sharp diminished 7, which is a really directional sound. It wants to resolve to a specific place, kind of like the 5 chord did earlier. Unlike the 5 chord though, this one's not pointing us back to 1. Instead, it's what's called a secondary dominant, which just means it's pointing us to another chord in the key, creating a momentary sense of rest on something other than the root. In this case, it's setting up the 2 chord, which brings us to our next phrase. This starts pretty much the same way, with 2 going to 5, which means you already know what's coming next. The 1 chord. Wait, sorry, I meant the 1 chord. No, the 1 chord. Ugh, fine, okay, it's 6 minor. I told you we were never playing G again. E minor's a pretty common substitute though. It shares 2 notes in common and it fulfills basically the same function in the key, so it's still a reasonably satisfying resolution. We call this motion from 5 to 6 minor a deceptive cadence because it kinda tricks you into feeling like we went back to 1 even though we actually didn't. They hang on that E minor chord for a full bar, even switching to E minor 7 for a bit to really drive home the fake out, and then we get this. Here we're back to 2 minor, but instead of going to the 5 like we've been doing, we start walking up the scale, first to 3 minor 7, then to 4. Unlike the other phrases, which at least gave us some sort of resolution, this bit is all about forward momentum. We're about to go to the chorus, so we want to keep things moving. Ending on the 4 chord is a great way to do that. It's really unstable, so your ears don't get a chance to rest before diving into the chorus. Although, actually, before we do that, I want to talk a bit more about these three phrases. First of all, it's a bit weird that there's three of them. Most Western music works by dividing things up into groups of 2, 4, 8, or occasionally 16. Those are the patterns we're used to, so after the third phrase, we're expecting a fourth one, but instead we get the chorus. I think this kind of blurs the lines between the two sections, making the chorus feel more like a continuation of the verse rather than a completely separate part. The other thing I want to look at is what these three phrases are doing. In the first one, we get a strong resolution to the one chord. In the second, we wind up with a deceptive resolution instead, and in the third, we get no resolution at all. We start by going home, then take a wrong turn, and ultimately wind up completely lost, which makes the return to the one chord at the start of the chorus feel massive. It's not even a super strong resolution. We're going from 4 to 1, which is called a plagal cadence, and it's usually considered a lot weaker than your typical 5-1 resolution, but here it still feels great because it's just such a release from the tension that was built up over the verse. Speaking of the start of the chorus, let's move on to that. Here we have the one chord, which again provides a huge release from the verse, and he sits on it for a whole bar to give you a chance to rest. Then we move to 2 minor, which serves to start taking us away from home, just like in the verse. If you follow the piano line though, he's not just playing A minor here. He occasionally drops a G major in as well. This is what's called a passing chord. We're moving from this voicing of A minor with a C on top to this one with an A on top, and adding a G chord in the middle lets us put a B in between those to smooth it out. It also adds some extra color to keep the momentum going now that we're only officially playing one chord per bar. After that, we go to the 4 chord, which is again behaving like it did in the verse, setting up a plagal cadence back to the 1 chord at the start of the next phrase. But this is only the 3rd bar. We're not done with this phrase yet, or at least it doesn't feel like we should be. We're expecting a whole nother bar, maybe playing a 5 chord or something, but Elton jumps the gun and starts the next one early, kinda blurring the lines between phrases again. Anyway, the next phrase starts like this, which is 1 going to 2 minor, exactly like the first time. We even have those decorative G chords popping up again in the 2nd bar. But this is the big finale of the section, so when we get to the 3rd bar, things start to change. First things first, we're back to playing 2 chords per bar like we did in the verse. This increase in the harmonic rhythm helps push things forward, creating more motion as Elton excitedly describes how awesome Bennie's wardrobe is. I mean, a mohair suit? By 1973 standards, that's amazing. Looking through those chords, we start on 4 just like earlier. The 4 chord behaves a lot like 2 minor, which means that when we go to the 5 chord right after, we know we're about to hear 1. Wait. Is that 6 minor again? Alright, fine, we've got a deceptive resolution, because the section's not done, so we don't want anything that sounds too final. Then we go back to the 5, and this time we're actually wrapping up, so we resolve back to 1... Really? 4? We go to the 4 chord? Alright, yeah, let's do it. 4 shares 2 notes in common with 6 minor, so the deceptive resolution we just heard kinda primes us to hear this as a successful resolution too, but of course the 4 chord isn't particularly stable, so it's not a very solid landing. In effect, this whole progression can be viewed as an elaboration of the first phrase of the chorus. There we went 1, 2 minor, 4, whereas here we went 1, 2 minor, then we started on 4, walked up and down the scale a bit, and ended up back on the 4 chord, ready to give us a plagal cadence again. We explored a bit more of the tonality, but this whole bit in the middle was really just decoration. Anyway, after that we go back to... wait, okay, hold up. What's this figure doing here? Right before we go back to 1, we get this B-flat major triad for a bit, so what's going on? Well, this is one of those cases where I'm not sure there's one solid explanation for what's happening. Instead, I have a lot of little observations that, when taken all together, make this make sense. For starters, this is just a continuation of the walk down we've been doing. We were just on C, so continuing down gets us to some sort of B chord. But why not B minor, which is actually in the key? Well, I think they wanted this bit to be subtle, so the bass is playing what's called a pedal. Basically, it's continuing to play the C from the last chord even though the harmonies moved on. This is a problem for B minor because C is a really dissonant note to play against that chord, so they instead do some more modal interchange borrowing B flat from the key of G minor. Which brings me to the big reveal. I'm not sure this is really a B flat chord at all. I mean, it has the right notes, but with the C in the bass, and especially with how relatively quiet it is compared to everything going on around it, I think it may be better viewed as what's called an upper structure triad. This is where you play a bunch of fancy notes over a chord, but shape it as if you're just playing another normal chord. 8-Bit just did a great video about them, link in the description, so I won't dive too deep here, but basically if we take the C major we've been playing for the rest of the bar and start to extend it, we could add B flat to make it a C7 chord, then add D, which is called the 9th, and then... well, normally we'd add F sharp, because F natural clashes really hard with the E in the main part of the chord, but here we're not actually playing that E, so the F just kind of replaces it, making this what's called a sus chord, where the third is replaced with the fourth. Take those three notes, isolate them, and boom, you've made a B flat major by decorating a C chord. So that's my analysis here. It's a combination of an upper structure triad and a sus chord played over an implied C major harmony, and it mostly works because it's fairly subtle. If you notice it, it adds a bit of extra tension that helps drive the coming resolution, but if you don't, it doesn't make a huge difference. It's just an extra flourish that makes the song a bit more interesting. And that's pretty much it. The form repeats 3 times with Elton and the band playing more elaborately with each run through. This brings a fun, improvisational feel to it that, again, makes it seem almost like a live performance. After the 3rd time, they just vamp on the intro for a while Elton plays around on a Farfisa organ and sings the name of the song over and over until it fades out to the sound of applause. It's a kind of surreal song, trying to capture the experience of seeing a fictional band perform live within the confines of a studio recording by a different, very real band, but for such a strange idea, I think it's a really cool, really fun piece of music. Anyway, thanks for watching. This song was chosen by my patrons over on Patreon, so if you want to help pick the next song we analyze, just head on over to Patreon and pledge at any level. You can also join our mailing list to find out about new episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and above all, keep on rockin'.